Now, you guys, look, I was going to do a funny intro where I was going to pretend to do the choreography for the Rhythm Nation tour, but I'm not going to do that. No, foolishness. That's what it would be. Yeah. What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and I'm so excited to finally dive into the Janet documentary series. Yes, this is on Lifetime this weekend. It's a 2-night, 4-hour documentary special. Huge thank you to Lifetime for giving me the first 2 episodes, so the first 2 hours, night 1 of this Janet Jackson documentary. Guys, this is something special because Janet Jackson's never really peeled back the curtains like this before, at least not that I've seen, and I'm sure not many people have seen. There's a lot of never before seen footage here, so I'm excited to dive into and recap what it is we are all going to watch this weekend. Like I said, it's a 4-hour, 2-night event that begins on January 28th. It's directed by Benjamin Hirsch and has a slew of amazing personalities in this documentary, all the way from Jimmy Jam to Missy Elliott. It's beautiful, and there are so many different testimonies that I loved in this documentary. Now, it kind of starts off with Janet Jackson as a child, or even before that, with the Jackson 5. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, guys, so before I get started and we dive into what it is that I loved, and maybe a couple of things that I kind of wish they dove into a little bit more. If it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love breaking down movies and TV shows just like this. So if you don't want to miss out, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit the thumbs up button if you are a big fan of Janet Jackson. Guys, her music is so darn good, and I swear I'm gonna go and probably listen to all of her albums after this documentary series finishes airing. And if you haven't already, go ahead and let me know in the comments, what is your favorite Janet Jackson song? I guess that's easy for me. Alrighty, y'all, so let's dive right into episodes 1 and 2, and like I just mentioned, it really does give us a lot of context to her childhood. And right away, I was so in love with how they used archival footage. It really gave us a peer into the living room, into their house, their childhood home in Gary, Indiana. I do like that her and her brother Randy were able to go and take that trip to Gary, Indiana, where, I mean, I'm guessing it had to have been as of last year or maybe the year before, but it's relatively new footage that we're seeing, and then they transition to the archival stuff, and they kind of have that nice balance in between the two. And heck, it was even a joy to see Katherine Jackson on camera giving her testimony as well, because I hadn't really heard too much from her before this documentary, so her testimony was really powerful. And the documentary makes it abundantly clear in the beginning that this is probably the most vulnerable Janet Jackson has been about her personal life. I mean, I haven't heard of anything, really, relatively anything, that she was talking about in this documentary before I sat down to watch both episodes. So it was amazing just to hear about her childhood, and it held so much more weight than just reading any article about it. And I thought that was one of the more beautiful parts of this documentary, is that we really got to see Janet through her own eyes, and that's kind of cool. And something that I was actually pretty surprised that they included were the voices of Joe and Michael Jackson. That took me off guard. I didn't really expect that. And part of me believes that, yes, this was probably from prior documentaries that they pulled the audio from, but the other part of me wants to believe that maybe this was planned to a certain degree. I don't know. There's no way that they probably kept those audio files hidden, but to me, I was hearing it for the first time. And speaking of first times, I love documentaries that can kind of educate me on things I didn't know, and in this instance, I learned a whole lot about Janet Jackson and the Jackson family that I've never known before sitting down to watch both of these episodes. Now, I knew that Janet Jackson had a spell of acting on TV, but to understand how she really just broke out first as kind of a TV star was pretty cool. I mean, I loved them showing us her acting on TV as a kid. She was an amazing child actor, and heck, she even acted well into her teens, where I think she did Fame. And I just love the fact that this documentary doesn't really gloss over that too much. Now, there is an area where they do gloss over just a little bit, but I kind of didn't expect them to linger on it. However, I would have liked to maybe hear a little bit more on the testimonial side when it came to Joe Jackson and how he, well, was very strict. And you can tell that the director and everyone involved in this documentary, because it is executively produced by Janet and Randy Jackson, you can tell that Joe Jackson and his discipline was something that maybe came up and either was cut from the final edit of this documentary, or maybe they just didn't want to spend too much time on it. And I respect that, honestly. You know, what happens in the house, you know, kind of stays behind closed doors. It's family business after all. But I will say that they addressed it early on and they just never got back to it. So if you're looking for anything like that, that didn't really happen in episode 1. However, as this series goes on, it almost feels like to me that they're getting closer and closer to some of the more controversial moments, but I don't want to hark on that because there are just so many different things about this documentary that made me smile. And one of the things that really made me smile was in episode 2, where you can start to see her kind of break out into her own. And that does begin with her distancing herself and eventually leaving her father as her manager. She just essentially wanted to be more independent and become more of Janet Jackson. And you see that through and through with the Control album, and then her performances, and then her getting in touch with Paula Abdul. We see all of that in the choreography. It's pretty cool. And I really love the fact that Janet Jackson took that brave, courageous step to distance herself and eventually find another avenue to promote not only her music, but what she loves to do each and every day. It's like she was trying to find that love once again, and she did find it. And this documentary really does allow us to take time and sit with moments sometimes, especially when it comes to all of her performances. So if you're a fan of tour footage, archival footage like that, there's a lot from the Rhythm Nation tour in episode 2 that just blew my mind. And shout out to the Miami Arena that showcased here, you know, a little hometown love. But of course, the documentary does spend some time with Janet Jackson's personal love life when it comes to her and her marriages. So they do lead with Janet Jackson and James DeBarge's marriage, where it did result in an annulment. Of course, James struggled with drug and substance abuse, so Janet, of course, wanted to distance herself from that as well, because she tried to help as much as she could, but like she says in the documentary, she wasn't the help that he needed. So I think that in that moment, that's where it kind of got me, like on an emotional level, because she even mentions to director Benjamin Hirsch and says, "Ben, I don't think I can talk about this anymore." And it was in that moment that I thought, oh my gosh, so maybe there are some things in this documentary, honestly, that caught even Janet Jackson off guard. So that just makes this more and more real, and that's really what I love a lot about this documentary, at least so far through the first 2 episodes, is that the foundation is very pure and vulnerable, and you can tell Janet Jackson is spilling a lot of things for the public, for a lot of people, that she probably hasn't even considered doing before this documentary. And staying on that same note, there's a lot of never before seen footage that's used in episode 2. And heck, maybe it was used in episode 1 as well. I don't know. I just haven't seen a lot of this archival footage. But Renee, which is Janet Jackson's husband with her second marriage, you can tell that Janet Jackson and Renee, they were a very healthy relationship. They were a healthy couple, and he was helping her, she was helping him, and they were really working in tandem. But Renee decided to, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and document our life together. And I thought that was really cool because they used it here. So, of course, I'd imagine Janet Jackson had to give permission for this, but the footage was just so different. You can just tell Janet Jackson was loving her life in that moment. You can tell she was so away from the noise and the hysteria of Hollywood, of the music industry, of the fandom, and she was really able to just enjoy a moment with Renee. And even the moment where they showcase Janet Jackson and Renee together in Hawaii, where Renee proposes to her, I was like, man, this moment is so beautiful. And I think that for me is something that is different than a lot of documentaries that I've seen over the past few years, where they're really going out of their way to just allow us to be in Janet Jackson's life. There's not a lot of pomp and circumstance, there's not a lot of fluff. It's just Janet Jackson in this moment, and we're going to give it to you. It's stripped down, and we're just going to allow you to be in this singular frame. And I thought that was so beautiful, and I'm really glad that Lifetime and Janet Jackson were able to produce this, because I think it'll also make a lot of fans happy to see something they've never seen before. Now, because this is only night 1 and these are only the first 2 episodes, I'd imagine that the second half of this documentary series is going to be much more intense. And the reason I say that is because there's this tease at the end of episode 2 where they sort of start to talk about Michael Jackson's controversy and how it followed Janet Jackson. And Janet, for some time before this controversy, had been trying to get herself out of the shadow of her brother, and that's where she kind of found her own lane during the Rhythm Nation moment of her career. But when this controversy, of course, sprung up, they even mention it during the little tease at the end of episode 2, where it's essentially Janet Jackson felt guilty by association. So I'm really curious to see how they handle this during night 2, because the final 2 hours of this documentary, I'd imagine, will be really fueled by emotion and a lot of conversations that I'm sure we probably haven't heard Janet Jackson have with anyone before. So I'm really excited to see where this goes, but honestly, I really loved my time with this. There's some things in terms of the editing that made me scratch my head, and in the middle of testimonies and archival footage, sometimes there's a weird jump cut that didn't really work and things maybe felt a little out of place during episode 2, but I will tell you that for the most part, they did a really good job at even bringing in old interviews from what I'd imagine were previous documentaries or just old interview sessions and kind of incorporating them here and placing them in pretty seamlessly within the narrative. So I'm a big fan of what we got in the first 2 hours, and I'm excited to see more, and that's essentially what you want from the first half of a documentary series. You want everything to kind of tease and lead you on to basically wanting to come back and watch the rest of it. So kudos to the team involved in this. Janet is a good documentary series. Even if you're not the biggest fan of Janet Jackson, I do think that no matter what, you've probably heard of her and the Jackson family. So this is something that is not only educational, it's informational, and it's emotional. And I really did enjoy my time with it. So there you have it. That's my real reaction, my real review, my real recap, I guess. There's so many different adjectives I can use for the Janet documentary series on Lifetime. Again, January 28th. It's a 4-hour event spanned over 2 nights, so you might want to get your popcorn ready. Actually, don't make all of it in one night, because then the second night is probably going to be stale. But go ahead and get ready for it, guys. And when you do watch it, let me know down below in the comments what you thought of this. Did it really appease you as a fan? Maybe did it make you a bigger fan of Janet Jackson? Let me know down below. And if you haven't already, hit the big red button, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit the thumbs up button for more reviews, recaps, and reactions just like this, guys. This was a lot of fun. There's a lot of heavy stuff in this documentary, but it does a good job again at balancing everything. So guys, I'm gonna go ahead and listen to the Rhythm Nation album again, because goodness gracious, it's so good. Alrighty, y'all. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.